Everyone can see it okay? Okay, great.
Hello, welcome everyone. Here we have Erika Holliday. She will be our presenter today. Welcome, Erika.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So as it was said, my name's Erica. Happy to be here with you all today. We're going to be talking about addiction, Narcan, overdose trends, and all in between. I think I have yeah. So we got a lot of stuff to cover today in our hour. And so I will ask, I don't know. You would think both by now technology I would be better, but I can't see the chat or I guess I can't see the time. I can't see the chat. So if there are questions,
Yeah,
Magda,
I
do you
will
mind
monitor
monitoring
it.
that?
Yeah,
Okay,
I will
great.
monitor it.
Okay. So yeah, I'm Erica. So I worked in substance use sort of prevention, overdose response, and how to use Narcan for the better part of a decade. And so I have a lot of experience in this place. I was formerly hired at the Wyandotte County Health Department to do substance use work. I left that job in September, and now work as a program manager at the Missouri Public Health Institute. And so my day job looks a little different, more general public health focused, but I still do sort of these Narcan trainings and overdose education on the side. So happy to be with you all today as a part of that process. So yeah, like I said, the big things today are we're going to be talking about overdose, how to respond, and really I just want you all to feel comfortable using Narcan and have a greater awareness of like what addiction is and how it's affects people. If we have time at the end, we there's some other additional like local resources and like language stuff we'll talk about. But the meat and potatoes is in the first two-thirds, so hopefully we can get to that at least. And so yeah, by all means, again, I can't see the chat, but if you have any questions, honestly, you can unmute if you want, or just using the chat is fine. Magda can let me know. I'm pretty flexible when it comes to how this stuff is set up. Okay, so let's dive in. So here I have a graph that sort of shows the history behind the overdose epidemic and how we really got here. So you'll notice the graph starts around 1999, and as you can see, sort of with that blue box there, the first sort of increase slash awareness we got with overdoses in the United States was in the mid 90s. And the shift that got to that was actually the increase of prescription medication being prescribed. And so a lot of people are like, oh, yes, that's been like crack cocaine was really big or heroin was around. Really, what started this epidemic is that um, people all around were getting operations, seeing doctors, going to the medical needs and saying, hey, I'm in a lot of pain and I've been here in the past, but you're not doing anything to fix this pain. And there was kind of an uprise amongst society about like doctors should be doing more to fix the physical, mental, emotional pain that we're in. Around that same time, Big Pharma came in and said, hey, we've got these great opioids, Oxycontin, they'll totally fix this pain issue you're hearing. And doctor says, is this addictive? And then one guy wrote one op-ed who didn't actually end up having approved, finalized medical degree saying, nope, totally not addictive, you're totally good. And that's how suddenly doctors took that word and said, great, we'll start prescribing away.
It
So
was the
not,
Cycler family, right? The Cycler family.
I'm not sure exactly the family that was a part of it. I don't know those details, but it was sort of the start of suddenly now everybody had full access, not only that, access from doctors to pills that at that time there was not really a lot of limits being put on it. And it was given to everyone. There was no questions asked around, do you have addictive tendencies in the past? If so, let's reconsider. Like that wasn't being talked about. It was just, oh, you're in pain? Here you go. Pill will fix it. Um, so suddenly there's just widespread access and people started overdosing from that. So that's kind of what we see here. And then around 2015 is when we see this huge spike, specifically in opioid overdoses. And the reason for that is fentanyl. That's when fentanyl entered the scene. That's actually around the time I started in this field. And I remember my coworkers saying things like, we've worked with this population for a really long time. We've never seen people overdosing as quickly, dying as quickly, acting, as erratically as this drug makes them feel. So there was just a big shift because of that fentanyl. I will point out that this graph stops in 2020, but it's worth saying that in 2020, because of COVID, we saw a pretty general increase of drug use across the board from I'm gonna start drinking wine every night because I'm stressed and I don't know what's going on. So yeah, I am gonna have a glass of wine to those who are more classically addicted, upping their use because everyone was under this huge amounts of stress because they didn't know what was going on in the world. Um, After a couple of years after that, general drug use sort of decreased, so spike in 2020 and then it decreased a little bit with things like fentanyl, more intense opioids. That number kept going up because that's kind of how addiction works. The stronger the drug you have, the harder it is to just stop taking it, especially when you already have those addictive tendencies going on. Um, so that's just something to keep in mind, and I'll give some more local data on the next slide around that. Oh, good. I see we have some things in the chat. I do want to click it. Are we good on questions, or is there any? You're on mute if you're. It's no.
Sorry, see, I need the image with the sands.
We have
No, it's just people put in their
time
email
only.
address for
Attendance.
attendance. But
Okay.
if there's a question, I will tell you.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so I pulled this data. Sorry, it's a little chopped off, but just to show you for Wyandotte, it's interesting because what we see here is compared to the rest of the state of Kansas, our overdoses are there's a lot, but it's not the most. So as you can see, again, sorry, it's cut off, but this is like the second most amount of like what we're seeing with high overdoses. So we're right here on the graph next to the state of Kansas. So we're just slightly higher above average. I will say population comes into effect here. So, like I noticed when I hovered, this is from the like Kansas website. The state has an opioid overdose tracker, and that's where I pulled this. So, like, I think if you like on the website, if you hover over this, this will say like 135 overdoses in the past however many years, like 5 years in Wyandotte County. Whereas if you go to like Miami County next to it, it'll say like 35. And it's like, oh, why is our number so much bigger? It's because our population is bigger and like the percentage of people who overdose out of the whole population is smaller when it comes to a bigger population than like Miami County, that's very small in Kansas. 35 compared to everybody else is actually a higher percentage. So that's where that comes from. I also just wanted to share, I apologize, the website was being kind of funky when I was pulling this yesterday, so I wasn't able to put this on the slide. But I did pull some more local data for Wyandotte County. So as far as fatal overdoses go, in 2013, sorry, 2023, we had 54 fatal overdoses, so overdose deaths in Wyandotte County. In 2024, we had 36. So if you remember from the last slide, I said after 2020, we kept seeing increases in overdoses and overdose deaths. Um, we actually saw a decrease from 2023 to 2024, which is actually a really big deal because it shows that a lot of the initiatives of getting Narcan out there, helping folks get into recovery, you know, sort of combined efforts long term is sort of working in terms of less overdose deaths are occurring. So far in 2025, we've had 8 overdose deaths, and this is from the local first responder data. So,
And so, sorry,
yeah.
how do we compare to Johnson County? Because I hear from friends and their children.
Let's see. Where is Johnson County on here? So it looks like it's pretty similar. So when I worked in the field, honestly, it's hard because Wyandotte County still, as of 2022, our last treatment center shut down. So there is no inpatient treatment in all of Wyandotte County. So Johnson County, it has similar numbers to us. They also have a lot larger population and they have a lot more like treatment centers and access and things. Like there's a lot more money being invested into recovery, which is neither here nor there about like actual numbers. But I think that's in terms of what when I worked it specifically in that field, we saw a pretty, in terms of percentages, we were pretty similar. And also because we have a lot of the population who is overdosing will often jump oh, what's the word?
Others,
County lines.
others.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So a lot of these numbers can kind of pool together, which is actually a really big challenge we have in the field where who's a Wyandotte resident will go to a hospital in Johnson County, and then how that data is collected and added up is challenging. I will say, as someone who's worked in this field, overdose data is almost always going to be a little skewed because people are not calling the police. People are not being honest about what they took because they're afraid of getting arrested. People, and so this data is only going to give us so much because of the stigma that exists. There's a lot of things not being said here. So a lot of the data I say, true, rely on it, but also take it with a grain of salt. Um, yeah, okay, let's keep.
There's in Western Shawnee, there is a new treat facility. I don't know. To me, it sounds like it's new one being opened.
Yes, I believe there is a new one being opened in Western Shawnee. There also is the works of some stuff going to be opened here in Wyandotte County. I will say I haven't got an update on that since I left the health department, but people are trying very hard to get more resources out there. It's really just like finding the funding, and the building location is like the biggest barriers when it comes to opening new treatment centers locally. Money, and then a lot of our buildings are owned by people who have insane rents, or a lot of people don't want treatment centers in their neighborhoods. And so that kind of, there kind of has to be that community support as well. And sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. But these are definitely all things that go into how to address these numbers for sure. Okay, so we're gonna move on to addiction in the brain. So for me, I think when we talk about addiction and we talk about these numbers and overdoses, it's a lot easier to understand the challenges that come with treatment and recovery when you kind of have an understanding of like what is actually happening within the person. So I have some slides to show you sort of those how it changes within the chemicals. But first, I'm going to show you some pictures, and I just want you to notice how you feel when you see the pictures. So here is the first picture, and the second picture, and the last picture. So hopefully, at least from one of those pictures, you felt good, like a sense of happiness, like a lightness in the brain. Those are my favorite things, so that's why I put them in the slides. That feeling, that good feeling when you interact with something that makes you feel lighter, that's dopamine, kind of realizing that that thing makes you feel good and like showing up in the brain, and it makes overall gives you a sense of calm, gives you a sense of like lightness, happiness, whatever you want to call it. Um, so when the brain and the body experiences dopamine, and it's something that makes the body feel really good, like more than just like, oh, I'm happy. Like, oh no, myself, I love holding my baby nephew. And when I see him, extra dopamine pops up. My brain will kind of create this like lock and key moment. So I can think, okay, whenever I'm having a bad day, whenever something really gives me extra stress, I can go find that thing, go eat my favorite food, or go FaceTime my nephew, and these things will make my stress go away. The brain has a special piece that's like, I know what gets me good dopamine, and I know how to contact that when I need it. So, every day as humans, we sort of wake up and exist with certain levels of dopamine already in our system. And I call that our blue baseline here. I call it fine. We wake up, we don't feel maybe on top of the world, but we're doing fine. We're doing okay. That's our blue baseline. And as we go throughout our day, there are certain things that happen to us that might give us a couple of more dopamine hits to make us a little above that blue baseline. Like we go to work and there's a pizza party. Ah, great. Dopamine. I'm at, 110% instead of 100%. And then on the way home, oh, there's like 5 o'clock traffic. And that's so frustrating because I'm going to be late to my after work activity. And maybe we get down to like 95%. But really, we fluctuate in that baseline of fine based on the general dopamine we get from existing as humans. So the unfortunate thing about being human is that it's very easy and likely that we can experience some pretty big pieces of trauma that will highly affect our blue baseline. So things like if you lose a loved one from death, or a relationship ends that you thought was going to last a really long time, or if you got in a car accident and the doctor said the pain would go away after 6 months, but you're on month 8 and you still feel awful. Those really big life things doesn't just affect our blue baseline to a couple. Suddenly we were waking up every day and we're at negative 100% or negative 500%, depending on how intense this trauma was. It's not something that our favorite food or a chat with our good friend, that's not enough dopamine to get us back to that blue baseline because that trauma is too intense. So that's where we go down to this like lower part of this graph. And so a drug like cocaine, that is 450% the amount of dopamine that your brain and your body naturally have. Jump down to methamphetamine, and I don't have things like heroin and fentanyl on here, but it's about the same, if not a little more. But those kinds of drugs are 1,300% the amount of dopamine compared to what your body is used to at that blue baseline. So on the one hand, you take that much dopamine, you take that much of a drug, you're gonna feel great. Like that sort of negative trauma that you are experiencing, that dopamine, that is enough to get you back to a good place. However, on the other hand, when you put that much additional dopamine into the system, it's not going to not affect the brain and not affect how your body takes in additional chemicals and takes in new experiences. So this is a picture of like how any drug will affect the brain. I'm just going to focus on like alcohol and etc. I'm just going to focus on opioids specifically, this pieces of it that it affects. So whenever you have a lot of dopamine, something like, that 1,300% in the brain, that a lot of that sends power to this yellow and this purple section here, the reward and memory. So there's that part of the brain that whenever you get dopamine, it says, "Oh, I like this. This makes me feel good. I'm going to remember that when I'm not doing good, I'm going to use this and I need this." And that's, that part of the brain with dopamine is on the driver's seat. It has the power. It's like yelling. That's all the brain can hear. Meanwhile, that power is taken and shifts from this blue purple judgment piece. And so the part of the brain that says, like, hey, make sure you get to work on time, or don't forget to pick up your kids, or, that part of your brain that says right and wrong, it becomes almost a whisper when there's that much dopamine because it really can't be heard over the I like this. This makes me feel good. This is helping me feel differently than how bad I felt when my trauma was so present. And the longer somebody is on that high amount of dopamine, pretty soon the brain shifts and thinks, I must need this to survive because this is what, like, how I get to that blue baseline, how I feel good. And so that very loud language sort of shifts from, I like this to this makes me feel good to I need this. This is what I like my body requires to survive. And if I don't have this, then I'm going to die. Like that's again where that addiction comes from. And again, like there's no hearing what comes from that judgment section because it's not where the power is in the brain anymore. So looking at withdrawal, some people, classic like, hey, you're ignoring your friends and family. You're not doing your responsibilities. Why don't you just stop? Um, so whenever someone stops using drugs, when they're in the space of like fully addicted, they are going against every power in their brain that's telling them they need this drug to survive. When that happens, not only is it going to be extreme like mental anguish, because like how often do we just like not listen to like, it's being like, oh, I'm so thirsty, I need water. Like it's like telling yourself, oh, like what this water is actually killing you. Like that doesn't make any sense, right? That's like the amount of power this drug has on the brain. But also when that stops, the body will kind of go into panic. And so when someone enters into withdrawal because they stop using the drug that they now have this addiction to, It produces extreme anxiety, agitation, flu-like symptoms, insomnia. Which when that's happening, the brain gets even more powerful around like, hey, you know what makes you feel better when you don't feel good? Your drug of choice. Like that's just sort of like again, like it's really hard to just go against the brain and also go against the physical and mental symptoms that happen when you take away this thing that your brain is telling you you need to survive. Um, and these symptoms will usually last around 8 to 10 days, sometimes 2 weeks, depending on how intense, every body is different. Um, yeah, and then they say the need and the awareness of how those drugs make you feel and how it kind of makes all that pain go away, that never goes away. That's kind of like a consistent thing that folks in recovery do have to deal with. So, when looking at recovery, on average, it takes somebody 5 serious attempts for recovery to last long term. And when I say serious attempt, I mean, like a 30-day treatment start and graduate, whatever that looks like for a person. Not everyone needs to go through a treatment center, but like 5 real, like shift use completely attempts for that to last long term. Now that number, and that's because like it takes so many times because of the intensities I just described on the previous slides. Like going against those is incredibly hard. That number increases when there's more psychological distress. So if somebody has a diagnosed mental health condition on top of those, if somebody, doesn't have a safe place to sleep at night or a job to go to or a connection with family and friends, that number, that like less reliable things to keep your life kind of stable, when that's not there, it takes even more attempts to remain in recovery. So I'll say the average or the mean, yeah, the average is 5. The median is 2, which it kind of shows on this graph here. And I will say when those social supports are in place, when somebody has family or friends they can turn to support, whenever they do have like a house, a house to somewhere to sleep at night, and therefore can shower and have prep for like to get a job if they don't have one, and they have an income coming in, all of that stuff can help recovery last longer because when things do get hard or things do, when trauma or challenging things inevitably happen again, they say, I have somebody to turn to, or I have a safe home that I can go to retreat in. And those can be the things that I rely on instead of the drug that I know makes me feel better. And so oftentimes when someone asks about recovery supports, it's like, yeah, treatment programs are good and important, but so are like housing and mental health access and healthcare availability. Like it's all into like the bigger system here. I know I'm going through this kind of fast. I just want to make sure we include everything. Do we have any questions or anything? Are we feeling good? Okay. Let me know if that happens. Do do do. So I don't know if you all have heard of ACEs. Some of you may have. It's something that's fairly commonly talked about in the social service field. But it stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. It was I don't know if you call it like a survey. It's like a test that was created years and years ago. And basically all these like bullets here are like check boxes that someone under 18 would take, or someone would take it based on when they were 18 and younger. And it's been found and studied that the more of these that have been checked, slash, the more of these that somebody has experienced, the higher it is that they will fall into addiction as well as some other chronic health issues. So, any kind of abuse or neglect, as well as if families had domestic violence involved, are in jail, has mental illness, or had a substance use disorder themselves. Um, it's this idea that when we're adults and we have fully, um, like our brains are done developing, we have more tools to start to address some of like these traumas. When we're young, we don't. Our brains are not done, and that's why it might be easier at times to turn to any kind of drug or chemical use, um, to address these kinds of traumas because they're happening earlier and we don't always have the tools or the know-how of to address it. So looking at this chart, kind of showing, so again, those check boxes, right? If somebody says, nope, none of that stuff happened to me, I had a pretty like safe childhood. We see like 1 in 16 are smokers, 1 in 69 are alcoholics, 1 in 480 use IV drugs. We go down, and if somebody says 1 to 3 of those things have happened to me, that number gets smaller. So we see 1 in 9 have smoked, 1 in 43 use IV drugs. So that number decreases significantly. 1 in 10 has attempted suicide. And so now we're looking at like four. When someone has 7+ ACEs, so 7 of those boxes, they've had a lot of those things happen to them in childhood. 1 in 6 smoke. 1 in 6 have heart disease. 1 in 30 use IV drugs. 1 in 5 have attempted suicide. And so a lot of people like have asked me, like, Erica, what about like our kids, these youth? How can we stop our kids from, uh, you know, making these poor decisions that might lead to drug use? And while like drug education and letting them know of the risks is like good and important, the overall thing that will have the biggest difference is, do they feel safe at home? Do they have a safe place to go? Or do their parents and their or their person who's raising them like have their needs taken care of? Do they have a safe place to sleep? Like if there's domestic violence happening, do they people have a place to go to both be safe as well as like to get help in like a therapy way? Like so much stuff is like for youth, it's not just education and like don't do this because it's not safe. It's also what does their greater environment look like? And that can be, and like, do they know how to ask and seek help if something is going wrong? Because that'll be the biggest difference. So, there is the question of like, why do only some people become addicted to drugs? There really isn't like a rhyme or reason. The ACEs that we just talked about is a huge part of it because of what we just described, a pretty significant piece. So the more risk factors somebody has, equals, more vulnerable brain, more likely to really rely on the drug, to make things feel better. Sometimes it absolutely is genetic. And so I have a good friend who's in recovery now, and she's like the youngest of 3 sisters. They have the same life, same parents, same childhood. Goes like they all like kind of went to the same parties and experimented a little here and there. My friend who's the youngest and her oldest sister, both by their own traumas as well as some genetic stuff, went on to develop pretty long-term addiction. My friend had like heroin and meth use for quite some time, had overdosed at one point, and luckily is here and in recovery and working as a peer today. The middle sister never had any issues, got married, had the white picket fence kind of family and life, um, and just never, had an issue with alcohol or drugs. And I share that to say, like, if you do know you have genetics in your family, it won't necessarily affect, everyone who is related, but it's important to have that conversation. It's important to say, hey, like, whenever grandpa drinks alcohol, he's different than others, that he's not able to stop like some are. And, that absolutely could be, talking to your kids, to your nieces, your nephews, the young people in your life, are related to you. If there is a possibility that it could be genetically transferred, it's important to be having those conversations just so they can be educated and know, hey, when your when your friends want to try one beer, like they might be able to have one and stop, and our family is different. And well, education, it might not change anything, but that empowerment and like knowledge that you trust them to have that education and like make those decisions on their own, that the empowered decisions can be really impactful there. Okay. Okay, so this is good. We're about halfway through our time and we're shifting gears to Narcan. I'll give a little minute if anyone's in the chat. Any questions about what we've talked about so far? So, addiction in the brain stuff, recovery, ACEs, anything coming up around that?
No, this is pretty interesting. I didn't know many of this or many of these things. Given
Okay.
I don't even drink alcohol.
Sure. Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, it. And it affects everyone differently, which is why it's like good for everyone to have this knowledge because some folks really do have this like big reaction, and some folks it is completely related to trauma, and some it is genetic. And so it's like the awareness is what's important here. So, okay, we'll shift gears to Narcan then. And so, again, we've kind of have the history, and I want folks to kind of have an idea of what's actually happening when somebody overdoses. So I want to stress my background is in expertise, or is in my expertise is in public health. Not a nurse, not a doctor. So I explain this very simply and very plainly. If we have anybody with a more specific brain background, I'm sorry. This is going to be put in a way that I could tell a kindergartner, essentially. But essentially, when somebody takes a drug, kind of like we talked about, the opioid goes into the body and into the brain, and it lands in like this opioid receptor. When an opioid lands in the receptor, that's like, the effect of the drug goes through the receptor, goes to where the trauma is, makes the pain go away, and then the drug, wears off and then it goes away, and that's the life cycle of the opioid. If somebody takes drugs or an opioid that is too much or too strong for their body to handle, there's lots of opioid receptors. They will all become clogged with opioids because it's too much. They're all going in there and there's not and like when they're clogged, it doesn't remove when it's done. Now, another thing that the opioid receptors do is that it's the communication mechanism for the brain to tell the body to breathe. So when there's too many opioids in the brain and they're clogging up the opioid receptors, there is no communication from the brain telling the body to breathe. So what is this going to lead to? Your lung muscles are going to relax, your breathing's going to slow, there's a lack of oxygen to the brain. Soon a person will become unresponsive or unconscious, their breathing stops, their heart will then stop, and that is how somebody dies from an opioid overdose. It's because, again, all the receptors are clogged, and so the brain can't tell the body to breathe. There's no mechanism for that to happen. So a really quick visual of what it looks like. And so we've kind of touched on fentanyl a little bit, but just to really show you again from the first graph that like spike we saw, like heroin is extremely deadly, but fentanyl is no joke. 30 milligrams of heroin is about the amount it takes to kill your average adult male. It only takes three of fentanyl. So a lot of why we see a lot of overdoses in Wyandotte County is because we have like our main consumption of fentanyl is through pills. So as you can see, like a lot of people might be thinking, oh, I'm getting XYZ drug of choice, but it's not fentanyl. I would never do fentanyl. Well, fentanyl is very addictive, and so it's easy to put it into a small pill with other stuff because it doesn't take a lot of it to affect the brain and to get that part of the brain is, oh, I need this. I definitely need this. Like it takes a very small amount to have that shift. Um, yeah. We do have carfentanil on here, which I'm going to be honest is used as a moose or bear tranquilizer. It's not something that we see a lot. Um, but I've done this work in Missouri and Kansas and Michigan and Alaska, and every single place I've lived and done this work, there has been at least one carfentanil overdose a year. And I share that not to make anyone scared. Don't be afraid of carfentanil, but just to share that like a lot of folks who are actively using drugs, they especially these days, we don't know what's in our drug supply anymore, and it could be very, very dangerous. Just a reminder that fentanyl, has like a good use. It's like a pain reliever for people in like hospice care or who have had like a really intense surgery. And so it's not like, there are no like good versus bad drugs. It's just like how and why we're using them, right? And so when fentanyl is provided by a medical provider in a safe place, it can have really beneficial ways to address pain on a short-term basis. But when we have something, like when this drug gets out into our streets and it's being put together by people who are not like having any kind of care about medical needs or amounts that are safe for the brain, that's where we see a lot of overdoses. So what does this look like? So this is what I want you to be looking for if you think somebody may has overdosed. So it's going to be very slow and irregular breathing. It's going to sound like someone's snoring, like that noise. But it's not going to be like the rhythmic snoring. It's going to be because they're not breathing, they're struggling to breathe. So it's that snoring sound, but with like very choppy motion to it. They're going to have blue, purple, or gray lips and fingernails, and that's again because of the lack of oxygen that's now taking place. They're going to be unresponsive to pain, and I want to stress we don't need to cause anybody pain to see if they're overdose. A lot of people think we need to like shake or slap. Nope. What I recommend is just a little breastbone rub, a little so you take a fist and if you rub it on your chest, you can kind of tell that like this doesn't hurt, but if you were like asleep or like maybe high and not fully with it, you could tell that somebody was doing this to you and you'd react. The biggest thing when someone is overdosed, they are unconscious. Like somebody does not realize when they overdose. My friend, the same one I mentioned, who has the sisters, when she overdosed, she like took her drugs of choice and then was gonna run to the store really quick to grab some food. So she was like walking down the stairs of her apartment, and then next thing she knew, she was in the door of a police car. Someone was giving her Narcan, and they were like, "Hey, you just overdosed. Like we saved your life." I share that to say is that people can't like prep for an overdose. They can't be like, "Oh, I feel different and now I'm about to overdose." It's a full blackout moment. And so if they don't react, like if they're fully overdosed, they shouldn't be reacting to this. And that's sort of how you can tell is that if someone was just having something else going on, they'd say, "Hey, wait, what are you doing?" But an overdose, that unresponsiveness is going to be a big key to see there. Pinpoint pupils as well. I don't think I mentioned. Okay, so naloxone, Narcan is the overdose reversal drug. Um, I will say naloxone and Narcan is the exact same thing. Naloxone is the name of like the actual drug, whereas Narcan is like the name brand. I have some right here. I'm going to mostly talk about Narcan today because it's easiest. If anyone ever does get their hands on a syringe version, we could talk about that briefly. It is just it's a muscle syringe. So one nasal spray equals one little vial of liquid here. For the blah, blah, blah. For the syringe, you take it, fill it completely up with what's in the bottle, and then it needs to go in a muscle. So the shoulder, the thigh, or the butt is where it should go. Um, yeah. With the nasal spray, you just pull back the package. This is an expired one, so I'm opening it. Stick it in the nose, and then press the plunger. There's only one use per nasal spray, so do not press the plunger until it's in the nose. If you spray it outside, then there goes the Narcan, and that's gone. What all Narcan does is it removes the opioids from the opioid receptors. That is its only use. So if you are like, "Oh, is this person overdosed or are they just asleep, like in a deep sleep, and I don't want to hurt them?" I could use Narcan on myself right now and I would just keep on talking to you because I have no opioids clogging my opioid receptors. So it's just gonna be a spray that goes in my nose. Um, so you're thinking, this sounds easy. It's because it is. And if you're not sure, still use it because it's better to be wrong than to not be sure and let someone die. All first responders, when they go on the scene, they have Narcan on them, and if they're not sure, they will use it, like just because it's not going to hurt them otherwise. Cool. Okay, so this is the big piece of this training I want you to remember. These are the steps that we say to how to respond to an overdose. We phrase it as take action, each letter of the word action being a step in the response. So first, A, arouse. So you see someone you think might be overdosed, shout their name, shake shoulders, which again, like a gentle shake or a sternal rub. We are looking for any sign of can you hear me? So you see someone, "Oh, Joe, sir, ma'am, buddy, hey, are you okay? Can you hear me?" Like get them if they like look at you or they say, "Hey, yeah, what?" Not overdose. They're responding. They're not unconscious. So go ahead and ignore that and do a different kind of response. If they're not giving you anything, if they're not reacting to the shake or like making eye contact, go ahead and go To the C, which is checking for those signs. So again, slow to no breathing, blue or gray lips or fingernails, unresponsive. It says again to pain, but just that sternal rub, um, a deep snoring, gurgling noises. If you see any of those, or really again, that unconscious piece is going to be a big sign of it. Go ahead and go to the next step, which is telephone 911. Why we tell you to do this before even getting your naloxone out is all first responders in Wyandotte County have Narcan on them. So if you don't have any, or if you need more than one, which we'll get into when that would be in a little bit, um, it's best that you have backup on the way sooner rather than later. Best case scenario is you're with a buddy and one of you can be using the Narcan while the other one's calling 911. This whole thing should take like 30 seconds max. So you call 911. Next, it's using the intranasal or intramuscular naloxone. So again, if you have the syringe, fill it up, shoulder, thigh, or butt. Nasal spray, stick it in the nose, press the plunger. If one nostril doesn't really matter, if one is clogged, use the other, with like snot or blood, I don't know. Use the other one. It's not like a COVID test, so we don't need you to like way get it up there. Just a general nasal spray is that's all. Next, oxygen. So, fun fact, mouth to mouth can have the same removing, unclogging effect as naloxone. So if you don't have anything, like if you don't have naloxone on you and you know CPR, do it. Um, don't worry. A lot of folks are like, what about spit? If there's fentanyl in the spit, am I going to get hurt? No, not really how it works. That's why it's often like injected, or if it's like a pill that's like swallowed. I don't know. We have a lot of horror stories out there that are like, well, what if the wind blows and there's dusty fentanyl and then I inhale and then it gets in my nose? If it was that easy to overdose, we would have first responders dropping like flies, and we don't. So if you're comfortable and trained, please do CPR. Even like, rescue breaths are good. There's this whole debate that goes back and forth in the drug world that's like CPR fully is better. And then someone else is like, no, just rescue breaths is needed. And I kind of say there's no wrong answer here. If you're willing and able to do it, do it. It could save a life. Last step is naloxone again. So if someone does not wake up in 2 to 3 minutes, and so as soon as you do that nasal spray, have a watch or just be generally aware of 2 to 3 minutes. If they do not come to, which you'll be able to tell because they'll make eye contact, they'll start responding, they may speak. Go ahead. So each box comes with 2 doses. So go ahead and use that second dose, or ideally, and keep that up. And then when first responders come, you can say, hey, they've had 2 doses, it's been 6 minutes, and they haven't, nothing's changed, or they just started breathing normally. You could have that sort of response so they know how to respond effectively. Um, it shouldn't take more than one, maybe two, but again, every body is different and we don't know what someone took. So really strong drugs take maybe three, four, five pieces of nalox or sprays of naloxone to come out of the overdose. That's less likely. I mean, it's more, again, we don't want to depend on that. Um, and people say, well, if it takes more, why don't we just like spray them all at once just to be safe? While naloxone isn't harmful, because it's like a very sudden like breathing, it can be like a little rough on the lungs, not in a way that will be hurt, but it could just, as we'll get into in a couple slides, like coming out of an overdose is really intense on the body. And if we don't need to make that intensity any more chaotic, then we shouldn't have to. So just one spray every 2 to 3 minutes. We feel good on that? Any questions about use? Okay.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah,
What type of opioids it works on and which ones it does not work on? Or
that's a great question. So naloxone works on any opioid. And note that opioid is a very, things like fentanyl is an opioid, or heroin, or like morphine, or certain like opioids that relieve pain. Things like stimulants like meth, cocaine, that is not an opioid. That doesn't call like there's no opioids in the opioid receptors. It's a different thing. If somebody were to overdose on stimulants, that looks more like a heart attack, or like a temperature, body temperature has
okay.
barely changed. So, I don't know. On different training, I have a list of like different like, examples of opioids, but generally any pain medication
Mhm.
from, you could overdose on Tylenol if you took, like 3 bottles, like a whole bunch of it. That is an opioid. And this would work on it. So any opioid, naloxone works. If they're taking a different kind of drug that's a stimulant, again, because a lot of stuff isn't pure today, we have a lot of folks that are like, oh, I don't need naloxone. I've used meth my entire life. That's a different thing. But we are seeing like think more and more things laced with fentanyl and people don't know. So at the end of the day, again, if it's like, Joe never touches opioids, we don't think this is what's that, still use it just in case. If you're wrong, then there's something bad's going to happen. But if there's any chance of opioid use, so any kind of pain reliever here, it will work on it. So good question.
Oh, I guess it's on this slide, so I asked prematurely here.
Oh, there you go. Look at that, number one. Yeah. So some quick facts about opioid overdoses or naloxone, sorry. But yeah, only reverses opioid overdoses and doesn't hurt you if you don't have opioids in your body. You can't abuse it. You can't get high on it. We haven't found anybody that's allergic to it. And it's been, Narcan's been out for, or like naloxone's been around for like 20 years. We just only started having the need of it for it 10 years ago. It acts quickly in 2 to 5 minutes. It only stays active for 30 to 120 minutes in the body. So that's a really important point. When you use Narcan, it unclogs the opioid from the opioid receptor. It doesn't make it disappear. So depending on the drug someone took, what's going on in their brain, and that's also why it's important to call 911. It is possible that after Narcan wears off in 30 to 120 minutes, their opioid receptors could become reclogged with opioids from that initial drug use. Not a guarantee, not even happening a lot of the time, but it is possible. That's also why it's important to call 911 so that generally they are taken to the hospital to be monitored until the drug is completely out of their system. Some folks they say I don't want to go to the hospital. That's not like not for me. That's their choice. They're their own person. If that is the case, best like they need to have a friend, a caretaker, a family member, somebody, a social worker, hang out with them for the next couple of hours with Narcan on hand, just in case the reclogging and re overdosing happens from that same use, so that they can respond again. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Can be repeated every 2 to 3 minutes. Safely used on infants, adolescents, the elderly, people who are pregnant. When in doubt, use Narcan. That's what I say. Not going to hurt people. So important thing to note, when somebody overdoses, or when someone comes out of an overdose, they go straight into withdrawal. So again, we talked about withdrawal in the beginning. Makes people feel awful. It's because that drug that they've been leaning on to make the pain go away, that trauma is suddenly gone. And so they're going to experience that like nausea and vomiting, diarrhea, chills, muscle discomfort, disorientation, agitation, and a resurgence of whatever, or resurgence of pain that the opioid was relieving in the first place. So unfortunately, when somebody comes out of an overdose, there might not be a lot of like, "Hey, thank you for saving my life." There might be like they're probably gonna throw up. That's why on this slide at the bottom here we have somebody in the recovery position. So if someone isn't like getting up right away and they don't look like they're doing too good, lean them on their side and prop their head up on their shoulders so that they don't choke on their own vomit. Um, Also, again, when someone overdoses, they black out. They don't realize it's happening. So it's really important what you should do as the person who's sort of, as a person who's there, who's a safe person. When someone comes out, be very calm. Say, "Hey, you overdosed. We used Narcan on you, and it saved your life." Sometimes that is a really good like time to be like, "Hey, you almost died. Like, do you need help? Do you want to talk to somebody?" Like, it could be a really good connection point for someone to say, "Hey, this was my rock bottom, and I'm ready for help." Not always. Sometimes they just want to be away. I mean, a lot of times someone overdose, you call 911, there's going to be a lot of people there surrounding them. And especially if they're using a substance that wasn't legal, they might not be too excited to see police around. And so what's important to explain is that, unless there's a warrant out for their arrest, it is illegal for police to like arrest someone when they're calling in response to an overdose. So explaining like you're not in trouble, you're not like, give them the option to be transported to the hospital if possible. But really the most like key thing is just like get them space. Make sure they have somewhere safe to go. Give them Narcan. Again, you can't use Narcan on yourself because again, you black out. So like if they're not going to the hospital right away, make sure they're with someone to have Narcan with them if possible. So yeah, the last thing we want is any kind of like intense situation because they're already going to feel really awful. Okay, so that's my last slide on Narcan and responding to an overdose. Do we have any questions or is there anything I can go over again?
So I just have a question, kind of, I don't know if it relates or not. So when people are in detox, like you
Yeah.
said, it takes 2 weeks or something. What is happening in the detox? What are they given, or how do they overcome the addiction?
So, really, and I'll say this is where a lot of my experience comes from. Like I haven't worked in like a treatment center before. I do more so like education and like overdose like response. So when it comes to that, I don't have personal experience, but I do think a lot of it is just people helping them maintain their pain. So sometimes it might be some light medication to help with the like massive headaches, pain they're experiencing. Usually it's just like, honestly, it's a lot of having people be in a room with a bed and just sort of waiting it out and like being monitored so that they don't rush to get the drug that they know is going to make them feel better. They're allowed to leave at any point, of course. There's not like a you're locked in here until you feel better. But there's kind of this commitment of, hey, we're going to get you food, we're going to get you water, we're going to give you a place to sleep while you like wait this out, essentially. And then the idea is after detox is done and they, those intense feelings are gone, the brain is still being like, hey, this thing makes you feel good. Go, like, where you need to go get it. That's what's gonna make you feel better. It takes a lot of time, like years, for that voice to be dulled. And it's just sort of, that's why it's so hard to come out of it because starting when detox is done, you're kind of starting back at ground zero of like, yeah, you're not in that intense detox pain anymore, withdrawal pain, but you still have to persevere and say, I'm going to ignore my instinct to go get this thing that's going to make me feel better. And I'm going to start to work through my trauma. I'm going to figure out, depending on if they need job or if they need a house, like that's like those first steps. So there's no perfect medication that as far as I know, anyone who has better answers than me, please jump in, but that like helps make detox easier. There's just like a lot that like a really intense support in the meantime. Let's see. Someone unmute. Okay. I'm going to use the chat as well. Any other questions? Okay. So I've got about 7 minutes left with you all. I'm going to end with some resources. We need more resources. Full stop. This is not a full list, but I do like to put stuff on here because again, I was kind of saying for like young people specifically, there are like a lot of people are like, how do I talk to my kids? How do I keep them away from this like path, right? And so Heartland 180, they have a lot of classes that are for families, both like parents as well as separate ones for youth that sort of talk through like the dangers of addiction as well as like what's your family life like? Do you have supports? And they are sort of like a holding space for like a lot of additional resources to come together. If someone says, yeah, but I don't have enough food, well, they can connect you to a food pantry or whatever that may be. So First Call KC also has a lot of, they have, it's not really a support group, but they do have like a course for families. We have a lot of, a really big need of like, yes, there's like an addiction recovery need, but also we have a need for like family support. And so they offer some classes around that. And then I think, yeah, there is a support group for families that unfortunately the closest one is in Miriam, Kansas, which is not crazy far, but not in our own county, but wanted to put that on there. Okay, so I'm going to end really quickly on language matters, and so I'll just put this here really quick. You may have noticed I maybe used or avoided using specific slides. So a lot of people are like, where do I start in being a support? Maybe I don't have Narcan, maybe I don't know how to access it, maybe I don't feel comfortable using it. We hope that that changes one day, but in the meantime, just using destigmatizing language can help build that social support that someone might need to take that first step into recovery. So what does that look like? We want to avoid terms like addict or junkie because that is very like identity giving. Whereas like someone might have addiction, the like brain disease, but that doesn't make them, that's not their whole personality. It's not their whole thing. Um, I will say in like AA or NA, someone might say like, hello, my name is Erica and I am an addict. Like that is like that community's choice in like making that sort of using that phrase. And that's sort of like they're in that community, so they can do it. But like myself, I've never been in like long-term addiction. I don't really have the right to name that for somebody else. So it's sort of a caveat there. Some stuff like I use let's see. Some of this stuff is like not as intense. But like instead of treatment, I like to say the word recovery because treatment often makes it sound like there's a very specific like steps to like get better. Whereas treatment can look different for everybody. Sometimes it is a 30-day program. Sometimes it's using medication like Suboxone to try to get to a better space. Sometimes it's just quitting cold turkey and that works for them. So recovery sort of has that more open whatever works for you for like your behavior change. So it's like getting you to a better place in life. A little more destigmatizing there. Not ready, not willing, non-compliant. We say experiencing ambivalence or experiencing challenges around. We have that just because someone might not be like not willing, but it's more so like their brain, like there's so little control when it comes to how drugs affect the brain. And so maybe they are not willing, but it's not like that can be sort of like you need to do better when really there's like so much more to it than just that. Same thing, or like drug abuse versus misuse or harmful use. I don't think that's as intense of one. But just like again, like how we're using our words is really important. Um, Ones I like is like not using clean or dirty because like, if like a urine test is clean or dirty, because we don't want to call anybody that. More so, like testing negative for not actively using, sort of former addict, person in recovery. So I picked the ones that I think are sort of more important. The other ones on here, I don't like from my work with the community, it doesn't really feel like that stigmatizing, but just like be aware of the words you're using and how someone might take them. Okay, I know I went through that fast. I tried to get it's a lot of information for an hour. I have my contact information on here. If you all have information or want any other like resources to use on your own time, please email me. I also have, so Heather Sharp is my former colleague at the Wyandotte County Health Department. She's a peer support. So they have a program. If you know somebody who says like, "Hey, I need help and I want to change my life, but I don't know where to start." She is somebody with lived experience who will be like, "Hey, as long as you have the will, like if someone's like you see them and like, oh, they need change, but they're not ready, then it's gonna be really hard for someone to change. But if someone actually wants to like shift their drug use, Heather is somebody who will help them show up to appointments, tell them where to go. They're kind of like a mini expert on um how like what are good resources locally. So having that support, especially with someone who's lived through it, is really key. So I have her, you can text or call this number and she can set up an appointment with yourself, that person. 1 in 3 people know somebody in active addiction, so it's out there. Um, Also, there's free Narcan at the health department, and a lot of libraries have
Yeah,
it.
we
I
have a
think,
library. We have it
oh,
at the
love it,
library. It's very
love
popular.
it.
Mm.
Great. So you guys know where to get it. So please, yeah, use it.
Well, this was very good, Erica. Thank you so much. This was everything I was hoping for.
Good.
Thank you for being with us and like thank you for all of your hard work. Thank you.
Yeah,